This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I am Old Gingerface here, your host. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for all the rating and reviewing that's going on. Truly appreciate it. Thank you most of all to the Patreon supporters. I love it, you guys. Thank you so much. You keep the lights on. You keep the boat afloat by supporting the show through Patreon. Link is in the show notes. It's just awesome. If you told me 4 or 5 years ago when I started this podcast that it would be listener supported, I never would have believed it. But here you guys are supporting the show, believing in it, and I love that. I love that about you. Thank you so much, guys. We are over 200 episodes now, which is just, it's awesome. I can't believe it. It's really, really cool. Great coppers, great stories keep popping up. It's like just when I think that I'm not going to have somebody or I'm not going to be able to find somebody, these guys and gals pop up, and each one is just as good as the last. They're just their stories are incredible. I'm really excited for today's guest from the Windy City, the great city of Chicago, the Bears, the Bulls, Polish sausage. So excited to have him. He's an author. He's also done, 29 years, veteran of the Chicago Police Department. He's now retired. He worked patrol, gang crimes, detective division, violent crimes unit. He started in 1977 in patrol, of course, promoted to gang crime specialist, detective, sergeant, and then lieutenant. Retired in 2006 while assigned as lieutenant commanding officer of the Area 3 Homicide sex crimes unit of the detective division. Without further ado, let me bring on the great Richard Rybicki. Sir!
Hello, how are you, Steve?
Great to have you, brother. Retired lieutenant, the big dog.
Oh, no, not that big, man.
I guess in Chicago there's a lot bigger dogs.
Oh, man, they are so top heavy. Oh, my God, yeah.
Are they really? So they got a lot of brass.
Oh, my God, yeah. Oh, more than I care to even think about. Yeah, I had a boss who 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 had a boss, and then there was the big boss. And then he had a boss.
In a place like that as a lieutenant, how often would you even see the chief of police? Was he more just like a political figure?
Oh, I don't think I ever saw him at anything other than a ceremony, a promotional ceremony or a funeral. That's about it. It's the only time I got to him. Oh, a couple of press conferences, but that's about it. Totally
out of police work at that point. Imagine the headaches this guy has, though. I mean, you have headaches as a cop, but then you're the chief of Chicago? Oh, my gosh.
But in Chicago, the chief of police is actually called the superintendent of police.
Okay.
And though he is the number one guy, we have deputy superintendents. And the number always changes. I think there were 5 at the time I retired. Well, the first deputy superintendent really is the guy that runs the police department.
Okay.
He was typically the mayor's guy. He's the guy where the mayor would tell the superintendent, this guy is your first deputy. And he actually pretty much ran the day-to-day business of the police department.
So he's like the chief deputy, like in a sheriff's department. He's running the show.
Yeah, running the show.
I have a question for you. I love that Chicago kind of has a throwback uniform. They do like the light blue and with the carrier vest over it. I think it's cool. They wear stars, which is like,
yes.
I mean, San Francisco also does, but there's very few major metropolitan cities that actually wear stars. That's usually a sheriff's thing. Is there a history to that?
Going back into the 1800s, they always had a star. I think it probably came from the sheriff. People recognized if you're wearing that star, you're law enforcement. So over the years, they just kept it. They had what we used to call the big pie plates. They were called pie plates because they were so big. The star was so big. It was a 6-pointed star back there. And really, it had to be 6 inches across, that big. And
that's gigantic.
Yeah. My dad was a Chicago copper, and he had that when he first came on, right after World War II. they still had the pie plates. And in the 50s, they changed it to a 5-point star and more of the size you see now.
Really? That's cool.
And that's one of the things I keep telling authors who are writing about Chicago cops. We don't call it a badge. We call it a star. If you write in your book that, oh yeah, he put the badge on him. No, you're going to get called out right away by every Chicago copper.
Inaccurate. Yeah. How many bullets did the old pie plates stop? They must have stopped some.
I don't know, but I bet they probably did. Yeah.
They had to have had. Absolutely. That's crazy, man. I have a soft spot for the star just from being a kid growing up watching Westerns and stuff. Like I always, Marshall Dillon and the whole thing. I always joke around if I ever became chief of one of these small towns around me, I would convert us all to wearing stars and, throw a carrier over my Wrangler jeans and wear cowboy boots. And
you have a regular 5-point star as a patrolman and a sergeant. If you go up high enough in the rank, they put little balls on the ends of the star tines, each 5. So you have five little balls on, one ball on each of the tines.
Yeah.
And then if you get higher up again, they take them away. The balls go away. And so that's always been a big joke. Oh yeah, they took his balls away.
That's really weird because I know I've seen the balls at the end of stars before, and I just not knowing a lot because a lot of sheriffs and prisons wear stars, and I figured they put the balls on there for prison guards because it makes it blunt. Like you can't.
I have no idea why they did it in Chicago. None at all.
Oh, man. Well, I love it anyways. I remember I was in police academy, and there was a girl in our class who was dating a Chicago cop. And we were at this regional academy going through, and you know how academy is. You get really bonded to everybody. And she, like halfway through, her boyfriend was at a Subway in Chicago off duty and got in a shootout. And we were like, to us, we were like, we were all going to like medium to small sized towns. We were like, shootout off duty at Subway. What the hell? And she's like, well, he works in Chicago. We're like, oh, okay, that makes sense then.
Yeah, you hear about it all the time. There was a time in the 80s where they really lowered the admission standards to become a cop. They needed police officers, and they kind of lowered their standards. And a lot of those kids in that class should never have made it onto the police department. And a lot of them got in big trouble, off-duty shootings, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's kind of what's going on right now in some of the major cities is they're starving, like L.A., New York, like places that are starving. Chicago, they're starving for just warm bodies. Yeah. And I saw it a little bit when I was at Backgrounds there where they were like starting to be like, well, you can ignore this, you can ignore that. We're not really going to ask certain questions because that might bring up some, you know what I mean? That type of thing. And, it's usually at Backgrounds, it's cops working Backgrounds or retired cops. So every guy there had the stinkometer, like, what? Like nobody was on board with it. But, the mayor and the civilian side of Backgrounds, they would make the rules. They were calling the shots.
When I first took the test, the admissions test, to become a police officer in Chicago. It was in 75 I took the test. Over 20,000 people showed up to take that test.
Damn.
20,000 people took that test. And I guess in the last year or two, they had another test, admissions test for the police department in Chicago. About 300 people showed up.
Wow.
That's how it's changed. That's how
it's changed. That's like here the Mass State Police is like the tantamount agency. They're like very well Stadies, exactly. They have like the 6-month sleepover paramilitary academy, and it pays really well. It's a very prestigious job. Same thing. They used to get 20 years ago. They would do a test, and they would have to get a stadium for the amount of people that were taking. And when you went to the test, the troopers were there, and they were on you, screaming at you in line. Shut your mouth. Like you had to wear a suit and tie to take the test.
Wow.
And now it's like, from what I heard, they're like, and they would only take scores like mid 90s and higher. So if you didn't get a 95 or higher, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Now I hear guys getting letters. Oh, I got an 83. They're getting calls. I mean,
We never got our score. We don't know what the score was. And if you passed the written and you got, I don't know, whatever score it was they considered passing, you moved on to the next phase, which was there was really no physical agility test when I came on the job. They didn't test weightlifting, running a mile, none of that stuff.
really?
But they had a physical exam, a medical exam,
Yep.
and they
Get the
like to
fat
give
bodies out.
those. Yeah, you got bodies out that way. And in the old days, it was heart murmur. Guy'd go down with the stethoscope. Boom, you got a heart murmur. You're out. And it's like every third guy he's throwing out. It's like they didn't have heart murmurs.
Yeah, basically, if they were tubby, they're like, well, you're a little too fat.
You're just weeding here. You're weeding them out. And but for us, it was blood pressure. So, we've got these lines, like 10 lines, and there's like 50 people in each line. And I get up to take the blood pressure. Some kid takes my blood pressure. He goes, okay, you fail. You got high blood pressure. I said, whoa, no, I know I don't. I was just at the doctor a couple of months ago. I know I don't have blood pressure. He goes, no, you fail. You're out. I said, are you a doctor? He says, well, no, I want to see a doctor. And
Good for you.
And then everybody in every line goes, yeah, we want doctors. So doctor came out and immediately, I don't think he even listened to my blood pressure. He goes, yeah, you pass. Let's just move the troublemaker on,
Wow. So what? This guy didn't like the cut of your jib or something?
Whatever. Maybe he's told every fifth guy throw him out or, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. But that's how they weeded people out.
That's a good example of, in those situations, like, you don't want to be the guy that speaks up, but if it's all on the line, be the guy that says something sometimes,
Yeah, for me it was. And back then, they gave the test so infrequently, I didn't want to wait another 5 or 6 years to take another test. So I was like, no, this will not fly. So.
Good for you. I love it. That's funny. That is funny. Rick, can you take us back to a young patrolman Rybicki on the streets of Chicago? Can you tell us about your first hot call you responded to, or the first call that really got your blood going?
There were a few, but the one I remember the most was I was probably just off probation with my field training officer. With my field training officer in Chicago, the field training officers, they didn't want to get in too much with you. They would go to a hot call, but he'd make sure you were the fifth or sixth car there. He didn't want to get, they just didn't trust you yet.
Right.
So in this particular instance, I was with another young police officer. He had maybe 2 or 3 months on before I did, a little longer. And they partnered us up for that day. And we got a hot call, man with a gun in a projects. Now, these are not the typical projects for Chicago. These are what we call row houses. They're small, 3 or 4 story, tall only, a bunch of them scattered around. So it's like, okay, on the 3rd floor, man with a gun in this apartment. So, we run up there and we're expecting troops behind us, but no one's coming. And that was pretty common in Chicago. Everybody's busy. You're not going to get a lot of backup.
Right.
So we run up there, and the apartment is at the end of a hall. And as you're going down this hall, there are doors on either side of you, and the door right in front of us at the end of the hall has got the numbers on it. So we pound on the door, please, open the door. And we're ready. We don't have our guns drawn. But we have them at the ready. And that door doesn't open. The door to our left opened. And there was a guy standing there pointing a gun at us.
Oof.
And, your heart jumps up into your throat. It's like, oh, my God, he's got us. He's got us.
Yeah.
We're done for. He realizes we're the police in uniform. He screams and runs back into the apartment. Doesn't even slam the door. He goes right to a window and throws the gun out the window. It's like, oh, thank God. Yeah, my heart was pumping after that one for a couple
Wow.
of days. That was the one you don't tell your wife about, as a
Yeah.
young police officer.
Yeah, you don't want to turn her off to the job right away.
Yeah, and that was a good example of you got to keep your head on a swivel. I mean, you got to be aware of your surroundings at all time. We weren't familiar with that project building. We didn't know there were connected apartments like that, and we should have. That's how you get killed.
Yeah, he had the drop on you. He definitely could have done it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Damn, you guys must have had quite the conversation after that. Been like, we are friggin' lucky.
Oh yeah, a lot of conversation.
Were you guys wearing vests back then?
Oh no, nobody wore a vest back then. Once in a while, some copper would wear a vest, but generally, I'd say 99% of the police department didn't wear a vest. That didn't come on until the late 80s, early 90s when they made it mandatory.
Yeah, I think they did that because they couldn't get the federal money for them unless they made it mandatory in the policies.
Yes. Not only that, though, too, was our bargaining union, but it's really just a bargaining unit. The FOP was our bargaining unit. And they had a clause in our contract that said if there are any uniform changes, first issue has to be paid for by the city. So if they were going to make the vests mandatory, they had to give us our first one for free.
Of course.
That's 12,000 police officers. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the city doesn't like spending that money on the police department. So, of course, what the city did was they had to drive, hey, save a cop's life, donate and to buy a vest. So they didn't come up with any money. The citizenry paid for our vests.
Yeah, I remember the late 80s and my dad bringing home a bulletproof vest and throwing it on one of our dining room chairs and the whole chair rocking and him going, I will never wear this thing on duty. It was like 3/4 of an inch thick. It was non-bending. He was like, half of us need new uniforms to wear this under our uniform. Like it's like so he just his whole career and he retired in the early 2000s, but he never wore it ever. He kept it in the car, which it's not going to help you out, but he just said, you know what? If I go to like a barricaded person or a standoff or something that gives me a chance, I'll throw it on, but I'm not wearing this for a 30-year career. He goes, he literally said, I would rather run the risk of dying on duty than wear this piece of crap for 20 more years. I remember him saying that.
Yeah. Well, in Chicago, there were always a couple a year where the vest saved them.
I bet.
2 or 3 a year. The vest saved them.
Yeah,
everybody hated those things, and a lot of guys wouldn't wear them, like your dad. But then some people had brilliant ideas, and they started wearing them outer vest carriers.
Oh.
They would buy a uniform shirt, take it to a tailor, and he would make a carrier for that vest. So you could put the vest inside this carrier, throw it on over your other uniform, and it kind of looks like you're still wearing a uniform shirt.
Wow, they were way ahead of the curve then.
Yeah. So
and that was allowed?
Yeah. Well, they didn't like it, but they didn't push the issue because they wanted you to wear the vest. So we had what was called the inspections division, and they would ride around. They were actually lieutenants who would ride around looking for all kinds of infractions.
Everybody liked these guys, I'm sure.
Yeah, not like the IAD kind of stuff or a civilian review board kind of stuff. This was just like uniform infractions. Hey, how come you're not wearing your hat when you're outdoors? That kind of crap. Nonsense. And they wrote up a couple of guys for that in the beginning, but then they were told, knock it off, leave them alone.
Really? That's interesting. So that's way, way early on because they started fighting the outer carrier battle in Massachusetts like 10 years ago. I mean, not that long ago. That they were, and granted, a lot of the cities outside Boston, like the smaller towns and cities, were, not a lot of shoot 'em ups. So they weren't so worried about people wearing them. They were more worried about how cops looked. They liked the duty belt. They liked the tie. They liked the clip. They like you to have the chapeau on, when you get out of the car. If you get out of your car, put the hat on, and I get it. It looks nice. You look like a nice policeman, you're dressed accordingly. So it wasn't, Massachusetts had the big push when everybody started going out on early retirement for back issues. And then they presented the load carrying outer vest. And hey, the military's been using these forever, and they save lower backs and hips. And so once you hit the money spot, the towns had no choice but to go, all right, we'll let them do it.
Money makes the world go around, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
These inspectors, let me tell you another couple of stories about these inspectors.
Sure.
Why everybody hated them. When I was a detective, turn on a black and white movie with Humphrey Bogart, and that's the kind of detectives we are. We're typing our reports on Royal typewriters.
I like
Most
it.
of them did work. 7 copies in there, so everybody can get their copy because we didn't have Xerox machines.
Oh my gosh.
And as time progressed, guys started buying their own portable typewriters. They got cheap portable typewriters that started coming out. I forget, Casio maybe made them. Portable electric typewriters.
Like word processors.
Yeah, but not quite word processors. They were still just typewriters.
Okay.
And it cost about $100 back then, which was a minor dent in our overtime pay as detectives. So everybody's got them now, and they're using them. An inspector comes up into our office, and he starts writing everybody up.
Oh.
Theft of city electricity.
Oh my gosh!
Bullshit these guys did. Well, our commander threw them out. Get out of here.
Yeah.
These guys are spending their own money to do a better job for the city, and you're going to write them up for this crap.
Wow.
And then another time when I was a sergeant, I responded to a nonsense gang fight in this abandoned house. So I've got no backup. I'm a sergeant. I take the call. I run over there, and I see an inspector pull up behind me as I'm pulling up. That's my only backup as an inspector. So I run in the house. Well, there's nothing there. All the kids are all gone already. I come out, and the inspector's like, "Hey, Sarge, you did a really nice job taking that job when nobody else was available. I'd love to give you an attaboy, a written attaboy, but I can't because you didn't bring your hat with you."
Oh my gosh.
Asshole. That's the kind of crap they did. It's like,
wow. It's that kind of person that takes that job where you're like, they somehow have had their memory wiped. And it's like, do you remember working patrol? Like, what the hell are you thinking?
I think they had a head count. They had to get so many infractions a day, So
that's unbelievable.
Yeah. He says, "I'm not going to write you up, but I'm not going to give you the attaboy either." It's like, okay, fine.
Yeah, thanks. Nice seeing you. Here's your hat. What's your hurry? Get the hell out of here. Damn, brother. Rick, can you describe the strangest or most bizarre thing you dealt with?
There's a few, and oddly enough, not too many of them were murders or things like that. I've had a couple of unusual suicides. I don't think I talked to you about it yet, but in this one case, I was a detective then. This one old guy, his wife had died of cancer a couple of weeks prior, and he decides he's going to commit suicide. So he gets all his insurance papers together, all his important papers, his home mortgage, or rather the deed for his home, and he sets it out nicely on the dining room table for his kids, writes a nice note for them, calls the fire department and tells them there's a fire at his address. He gets a gasoline can full of gas, goes in his bedroom, closes the door, douses himself and the mattress, and lights himself on fire. That's the way he committed suicide. I thought, how could anybody do that? That's got to be the worst way
Yeah.
ever to commit suicide. You've got a garage, you got a car, man. That's the
Gas
easiest
yourself.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, easiest way, nice and peaceful. You go quietly. No, he burned himself. I thought there is some psychological thing there going on that he wanted that pain. It was just, I just couldn't believe anybody would do that as a way to commit suicide. And the fire department got there. He was dead. He was burned to a crisp by the time they put out the fire. And, but it was confined to the bedroom. I don't know how this guy knew that it wasn't going to spread to the rest of the house so quickly.
Yeah.
But it was terrible. It was
That's insane. Did you watch that video at all of the U.S. soldier protesting the Palestinian war by lighting himself on fire?
Yeah, I did.
I really wish I had. I really wish I had not watched it, because it's one of those things where you're like, it just came out and it was still, the real video was still all over Twitter and like other places, and you see the thumbnail and you're like, I gotta see what this guy said. Like I just gotta know. This friggin' kid is, first of all, he's like talking coherently and is of sound mind, kind of sound like this guy. Like he knew what he was doing. He wasn't like out of his mind.
Yeah.
Talking, and then the amount of time he spoke and lived while fully engulfed was like haunts my dreams. Disturbing.
Yeah. That's got to be the most horrible way to die. And I have to think is once you do that, once you douse yourself in the accelerant and you strike that match, I think right then you got to be thinking this was a bad idea. But not with this guy. Like you said, he was talking and
it's like the bridge jumpers, the ones that live. They will tell you halfway down. I was thinking, this is a huge mistake, but there's no mulligan.
Yeah.
You're airborne. There's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
horrible.
Horrible.
Another bizarre thing was I was a detective lieutenant already, and there was a party, bunch of college kids, a couple of hundred college kids actually. They had this 3-story house. I don't know if they rented the whole house or I don't recall exactly what. But it was a big 3-story house party, and there was a 3-story porch on the back attached to, and relatively new, kind of that green wood, that womanized wood or whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
So pretty new, but 3 stories high. Well, absolutely during the summer, it flows out onto these porches. And I guess on the top porch, there must have been 100 kids on it. And it collapsed down onto the porch, which was full of kids, which then collapsed down to the first floor full of kids. There were over 30 kids killed in that.
Wow.
That was horrible. And it's just an accident, but 30 people killed, and those notifications to the parents, how horrible, right?
Yeah.
30 kids killed. And that was, I thought, bizarre too, because wouldn't you think, I guess they're not thinking, they're drinking, they're having a party.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think 100 kids on the porch is a bit too many? I mean, just horrible.
That's nuts. So, Rick, when like a tragedy that big, would you reach out to every family and try to have, like, say they're not from your area, would you try to have a patrol officer from that community go, or would you do it over the phone?
If at all possible, we want a personal notification. So anyone in Chicago, we would send Chicago police. But if they're suburban, we would call at suburban department and ask them to do notification. If they lived further away in another state or something, we would do the same thing. Call the local police department and ask them to do that notification. The last resort is a phone call. We did not like doing phone calls.
Yeah,
and
that's tough.
I don't know if you've ever done many death notifications, but that's the hardest part of the job I always thought was doing a death notification. Um, one of them, we had a murder on one of the elevated trains. It was actually like the loose basis for my fourth book. But an attorney going home after work one day on the L train, all of a sudden one of the people on the train gets up. He starts going from person to person with a little pistol, robbing him. And it gets to this guy, this lawyer, who's like 6'4", a good solid 300 pounds, big guy. He looks at the guy and says, "That's a toy gun. I'm not giving you my stuff." And guy pops him, little 22, and he died right there. So I wound up having with my partner to go and do the death notification, and one of the hardest ones I've ever had to do. And he lived in a local suburb, and one of the reasons why it was so hard for me was because the family was all together, and it turned out sister-in-law. She was a one-time girlfriend of a good friend of mine. And it's like I saw her and it's like, oh my God, it's like, and I made the biggest mistake I ever made in my career as a detective. I told her, "Don't worry, we're going to get this guy. I promise you, we will get him." And of course, we never did. We never found the guy. And it's like, even as we were walking off that porch after death notification, my partner's like, "You never make a promise. Never promise that." It kind of still haunts me a little bit to this day. Never make that promise.
Of course, as naturally you want to say that. You want to say anything you can to make them feel better.
Yeah. And a lot of people will try to pull that out of you. Promise me you'll catch this guy. Promise me. And, the most you should do is we're going to give it our best shot. Not our best shot, but we're going to do our best. We are going to do our best to do everything we can to catch this guy. But don't make a promise. It'll haunt you.
Yeah, that is tough. That I've done a few, and they are so hard. And I had one I've talked about before, but it was from Rhode Island State Police called, and they were like, not only they wanted me to tell the dad, they also wanted me to ask the dad if the kid had a certain tattoo on his shoulder because his face was unrecognizable. I'm like, oh my God, I got to tell the dad. And then as soon as I tell the dad, I need to confirm a tattoo. He's going to know his son is like mangled beyond recognition. I was like, and the trooper was even like, I'm sorry, brother. I'm like, dude, you're killing me.
Yeah.
They are. You never know how some people will literally drop to their knees and have an immediate reaction. And I've had other people just be like, they start talking about their schedule tomorrow and like, do I need to not go into work tomorrow, or like, should I? Like, they just get real analytical about it because I think that's just like a reflex, and then 5-10 minutes later, then they're
falling apart.
Yeah, and it's just like you just stand there like a helpless idiot, like you're just like I'm sorry.
Only had one where I didn't feel that bad.
Oh, really?
A gangbanger gets himself killed. Typical gang shootout, whatever, drug deal. I forget exactly what it was. He gets himself killed, and we go do the death notification at his house. And so it's like, boom, 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 knock on the door. Who is it? Police, can we talk to you, please? Get a warrant. No, come on, we have to talk to you. Now, we don't want to say anything through the door.
Sure.
So we're pounding, and they're getting really angry, cursing at us, go get a warrant, you ain't coming in, and the detective I was with, he's being really nice. In fact, his nickname was Father Tom because he was that type of guy where he was always very sympathetic.
Very kind man.
Tom. Yeah, very kind man. And, I just got fed up and I yelled at him, "Pookie got killed. Do you want to talk to us?" Well, right then the door flies open, and I told Father Tom, I said, "See, that's, some people you just can't talk to."
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. Oh, man. I can't imagine being a copper in Chicago, brother. Unbelievable. We had, at backgrounds, we did have, I had one candidate that applied from South Chicago. Pretty tough neighborhood. But I think she made it. I think she ended up being a good egg. But it was like, as soon as you see the address and you talk to Chicago, you're like, this is not going to be a quick background because there's so much. There's just so much availability for gang involvement and everything else. It's like you have to vet these people like down. But I think I want to say she did make it, and she ended up being a good LAPD hire. But damn, man,
There's
Rick,
good people. The projects in those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Good people. I mean, I loved working in those areas. Loved working in the economically deprived areas, in the low income areas, the high crime areas, because I knew you learn really quickly that there's a lot of good people there. There's a lot of good people who, not through, I'm not going to get into socioeconomic reasons, what put them in this situation, but they're good people.
Yeah, they don't want to be there either.
Yeah, they deserve our good work.
Yeah.
They deserve to be protected. And so that's why I liked working in those neighborhoods, because it was always really satisfying, when they can't come out and say it, but, they're closed shades and they give you a little thumbs up or something, it was always nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said it before, but a friend of mine, Dave Biscotto, who I worked backgrounds, he was a homicide detective in LA. And I was rapping on doors in East LA, South LA. And I would always ask the guys, like, should I go here alone or not? Or, being an East Coaster there, kind of just sink or swim. They'd always help me out. But he said something similar. He was like, most of the people you're going to meet are like, they're good people. They like the police. Like they just live in a very bad situation. They live somewhere they wish was better, and they're very sweet. Like so many times you knock on the door and Abuela would open the door and invite you in, and she's making something. It's like, wow. It's like I learned quick to go like at 8 a.m. Don't because all the gangsters are asleep. Like Don't go late afternoon, when they're waking up.
Right.
But if you go there and talk to the normal people, they're sweet. They're very nice. We had so many candidates that were from bad neighborhoods that were like, they would be like, hey, can you not? Hey, my neighbor two stories down is in the gang and he sells drug or whatever, and I really don't want him to know I'm applying to be a cop. Can you do something? Or can you amend? Or can you say I'm applying for something else? And so I would talk to my bosses and be like, hey, and they'd be like, yeah, take the, if no one's home, you got to leave. If you got to leave a questionnaire, change the heading to City of LA, not the PD. You know what I mean? Like you would do things so that they didn't feel like they were going to get jumped. When they came home, it was just sad. It's like this kid wants to do the right thing, and he's like scared to death of his neighbors. Like he just wants to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah, so terrible, brother. So, Rick, can you tell us about the most intense or terrifying thing you dealt with?
It was the only shooting I was ever involved in.
Which is a good feat for Chicago PD.
Yeah. I feel very lucky to have only been involved in this one, and that's the only one. And in fact, I didn't even fire my gun. It was my partner. My partner and I, we were in gang crimes at the time, and we're running a bust and buy mission. And we're in a trap car. We're in we called it a trap car, but it's just like an ordinary car that did not look like a Crown Vic or a Chevy Impala, typical car back then.
Didn't look real copy.
80s. No, it didn't look real copy. And we're dressed in plain clothes, have our guns hidden behind our backs, and we made a couple of buy busts throughout the day, and we're pretty much on our way into the barn at this point. Time to go home, and we're driving through one of the rougher projects in the city, at least on the west side of the city, the Henry Horner projects, and we're on a main thoroughfare, Damon Avenue, We get to the intersection of Lake Street with the elevator right above us, and kid calls out. He must have seen, here's a couple of white guys. Hey, you want to buy some reefer? My partner is driving. He slams on the brakes. Yeah.
Right.
So the kid starts coming over, and away, we both notice, it's like, hey, it's the middle of summer, and he's got a jacket over his arm. This is not good, covering his hand.
Mm.
And so we're getting ready, and he comes up and boom, he ups a pistol, puts it on us in the car, got the gun right outside the car on my partner's side, and my partner just quick drawed him. I mean, I can't believe he moved that fast. He just whoop, boom, shot him. One shot hit him right in the nose.
Wow.
And boom, he goes down. Now, this was the middle of summer, probably about 8 o'clock in the evening, and there were hundreds of people out. Hundreds. Well, by the time we got out of the car, there was nobody. The street had just cleared. And he's laying there on the ground, and we called it a 10-1, officer needs assistance. We called that in and sent an ambulance. We got a man down. Both officers are okay. Shots fired by the police. And so, all of a sudden you hear all the sirens start coming. And we're sitting there and we're kind of waiting. And we're kind of looking around, see if there's any witnesses around. Maybe we could corral. His gun is laying next to him, Well, we recovered that right away. We're not going to leave that on the street. And we're waiting, and the sirens are getting closer. The kid gets up.
What?
And tries to run. He gets up and tries to run. We had to knock him down. And we handcuffed him, and wound up going to the ER, and he lived.
Wow. What kind of round was this?
This is a 30. This is what we had to carry back then. We had revolvers back then. We didn't have semi-autos. It was revolver and a 38. The round was a 38, 48 grain plus P.
Plus P even.
Yeah. Soft lead hollow point.
And it was coming out of a snub nose?
Came out of a 4-inch.
Wow.
Hit him right in the nose. And it shattered. We find out later that the bullet just shattered when it hit him in his head. He lived. No brain damage, nothing. He did 10 years for the attempt robbery. And when he got out, he was right back in those projects. And we met him a couple of times. And his nickname was No Nose Ambrose. His name was Lonnie Ambrose.
Oh, jeez.
So he was No Nose Ambrose. He lost his nose. That's the worst of what happened to him.
Wow, that is from a ballistic standpoint. Like, so if you have a 4-inch barrel, it's a 38 plus B. That should be pretty close to like a 9mm, modern 9mm.
Yeah.
And it just did not go in.
Nope.
Was it lead, like soft nose lead or something like that?
Yeah, it was hollow point, but it was just soft lead. It wasn't jacketed or semi-jacketed.
Okay. What a lucky SOB. What a lesson he learned. What was he thinking? Was he thinking, I'm going to rob these two white guys? Is that what he's?
Yeah.
So he didn't make you out of, he didn't think you were coppers. He was thinking this is an easy target for me to rob.
Yes, that's all it was. So that was pretty terrifying.
Damn.
There were other terrifying incidents, like the first one I told you about, the kid standing there with the gun in the projects on us.
Yeah.
There were a lot of those, but that was probably the most terrifying,
Absolutely. That's nuts. Thank goodness your friend is Quick Draw McGraw there,
Yeah. I was in my early 30s back then. And of course, we've got to go to the detective division, do our reports there.
Sure.
Be interviewed by the detectives. And one of the detectives I knew, I'd come on the job with him, and I'm over there doing my report, and he comes up behind me and goes, "Hey, you're going gray." I said, "What?" And this is the first time I ever realized, I was starting to get gray hair. And I never noticed it before, so I don't know if it happened because of that.
Yeah.
Some people, boom, your hair in frightening situations just will start turning white. But within 5 years, I was full gray.
That's funny. Yeah, it's funny too. Everybody always jokes my chief and I are close in age, but he's got all kinds of gray in his beard, And they always joke that it's because he's, he has, from being chief, he's stressed out all the time, dealing with whatever he's dealing with.
I've got a couple of friends who are all gray, except for their mustache. It's perfectly black. And it's like, oh, man, no. You let it go, man. Stop using that just for men on the mustache.
It is funny who will use that. I've known some very hard-nosed cops you never would imagine would care. And all of a sudden their hair is brown, but it looks kind of purple. And you're like, wait a second. Dude, just let it.
Orange. It's got that orange.
Yeah. Just let it go, brother. Who cares? We're men, no one cares. Well, that's too funny, brother. Rick, do you have, from your time on the mean streets of Chicago, do you have a positive or heartwarming story you could share?
There are probably some. I really can't think of too many right now. It's always nice to be able to, have someone say thank you.
Sure.
But heartwarming, probably, I don't know how heartwarming it is, but as a detective, my partner and I were working a cold case. And we got handed this. It was like 10 years old. A murder in a fix-it shop. This guy ran a little fix-it shop, and he was bludgeoned to death in his own shop. And it was cold. And we get handed it because there was an APHIS hit on the murder weapon. Murder weapon was a car starter. One of those big, chunky metal car starters.
Yeah.
And there was a fingerprint on it. And this was the advent of APHIS, the automated fingerprint identification system. They take all these old cold cases and they start feeding them into APHIS. Because it was the first time they were available to us. So we get the hit. Our sergeant says, here, go see what you can do with this. Well, the guy, turns out we go see him, and it turns out he had some traffic warrants on him. So we're bringing him in on that pretext. He had traffic warrants, and but he lived nowhere in the area. He was far south side of the city. He was a over-the-road trucker when he worked. So we bring him in, and my partner, I was a pretty new detective at the time. My partner was an experienced homicide detective. He gathers up all the crime scene photos, and he walks in cold. And this guy's sitting there, and my partner just lays them out one by one, all these crime scene photos. And the guy just starts bawling. He just starts crying. He goes, I didn't mean to kill him. And it's like, boom, just like that. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy just gave it up.
Yeah.
He just gave it up. So he wound up getting charged with the murder, 10 years old. And my partner's like, hey, call the family, let them know. And that, I thought it was going to be hard, but the family was so nice, so grateful. So thank you for keep working on this. We gave up on this a long time ago, and they were just so happy. And it was just such a good feeling knowing that you can give somebody closure that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if there ever really is closure, but as close as you can get to it, we were able to give that to the family. So I felt good. That's, you don't often see that.
Yeah.
That especially in the neighborhoods I worked, most of those people who were killed, they kind of brought it on themselves in many ways. So, you didn't have a lot of heartwarming moments with them or their gangbanger buddies.
Right.
But this felt good. Yeah, this felt good.
Absolutely. Yeah, because they got to be wondering, who was it? Was it somebody we know? You know what I mean? Like that probably really helped their conscience rest. Yeah.
You hope. Like I said, being a homicide detective for all those years, I don't believe in closure. You can't give anybody closure. That's the best you can give them is some measure of maybe revenge, knowing that you caught the guy and he's going to be punished now.
Retribution.
But I don't know that you could have a family member, a close family member, murdered viciously and come to terms with that and be okay with it at some point because they caught the bad guy. I don't believe in that kind of closure.
Yeah. Only God can bring that. That's tough. Absolutely. Rick, popular question. A lot of listeners are on the fence about becoming cops, or they're in backgrounds, or they're in academy, and they really love listening to you guys tell your stories. Do you have any advice for new police officers getting out there in the field?
Well, police officer, that job is the worst job you're ever going to love. It is. It is the worst job you're ever going to love. All those years as a homicide detective, I've seen horrible things, and you hate it. You hate seeing what you see. You hate carrying around what you have to carry, but you really feel good about the work you're doing.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of personal satisfaction in that. And advice I would give to young coppers is keep your mouth shut. Listen to all the people around you that you work with. Pay attention to them. Find the ones that you would like to emulate, the ones you respect. Watch what they do, listen to what they do, and try to, like I said, try to emulate that. Try to be like them. And for the first 5 years, just keep your mouth shut. You don't have any salt until you get 5 years on the job.
Yeah, keep your mouth shut. That's great advice, because they're, a lot of the ones coming up now they're going to tell you how they think it should be done, or they have their own ideas about stuff, and it's just not a great idea. My dad said that to me when I got into police work. He's like, you know what? He's like, Stevie, you'll be all right. He goes, you show up to work on time. You're going to keep your mouth shut and just keep your eyes open. You'll probably be fine, because that's all we really want when you're new. Like, we just don't want new guys showing up with, like, he was a sergeant, then lieutenant, and you would get those new people that were like, oh yeah, but Sarge, I think X, Y, and Z would be better, or whatever. And it's like, the guy's been a police sergeant 30 years, and now it's like, you're 6 months on the job, and your X, Y, and Z is going to solve. It's like, he would just like, he was just at that point, like, just do what I told you. Shut your mouth.
Millennials, man. Millennials. When I first became a lieutenant, I was assigned as a watch commander in this one district. And I'd been there for about a year, maybe a little longer than that, working on the midnights, the overnight shift. And I get a note from the commander, hey, make sure somebody does this at like 5 a.m. or whatever. So I call dispatch. I tell them, listen, get one of my cars, assign them to this. Okay. Next thing I know, these two guys are coming into my office. And they're like, hey, Lieutenant, we got this job. I said, yeah, how come you're not out there doing it? And it's like, well, why? What do you mean, why? Why do you want this done? Because I said I wanted it done.
Right.
Now get out there and do it. And they're like, well, okay, but why us? I was like, oh, man, why us? Why? I was going to strangle these two guys.
Yeah.
And they must have seen it in my face, because they just ran out of there. It was like, oh, my God. It's like Dorothy said, if you had a brain, what would you do with it?
Yeah. I mean, there are moments where, and if you can just keep your mouth closed for long enough, there are moments when your sergeant, lieutenant, whoever will say, hey, what do you think about this? They'll ask for input. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That means they kind of trust you a little bit. Like, that's the moment where you can, like, oh, okay. You have an idea. Yeah, he cares about my ideas. It's like, you don't go into the guy's office and start asking questions. Like, it blows my mind.
I had two other guys in the same office on another day come into my office, and they're, hey, Lieutenant, and it's like, it was nice. Like you said, there was a level of trust there now. And they're telling me about this job they've gotten there. We've got to do this. We want to do this. I said, whoa. They're asking me advice. What should they do? What should they do? And I'm like, wait a minute. Where's your sergeant? And they're like, well, out on the street, I guess. Why? Did you tell him about this?
Yeah.
Well, no. Get out of my office. Find your sergeant.
Jump in rank. That's another big thing.
If he thinks it's important enough, he'll bring it to me. Other than that, get out of here.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I was a chain of command guy. Do not bring me that your sergeant should be handling. It's like, go to your sergeant.
Oh, good for you, man.
Driving me crazy.
There are too many people that would entertain that. But you're absolutely right. That just undermines the guy working for you now. Like, oh, this guy, the lieutenant's kind of doing stuff on the side without me with my guys. What's that? How is that going to help morale? How's that going to help you out with this sergeant?
Right, exactly.
Now he's not going to like you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they'll get it, maybe.
Well, actually, they did get it because one of those two young guys wound up becoming a deputy chief on the police department after I retired.
Oh, wow.
He was a sharp kid. Yeah.
That's cool.
But I believe he probably came to respect that chain of command.
Oh, I'm sure he respects the hell of it now he's deputy chief. Rick, tell us about the books, brother. Are these are novels.
Yeah, I've always kind of had the bug to be a novelist, a writer, and never really did it seriously while I was on the job. So once I retired, I was like, hey, why not? Let's see if I can do this. And one of the things that happened was a really good friend of mine. He was also a copper. We grew up together. He had a boss. His captain was Hugh Holton, who was a pretty good novelist and sold a lot of books, published a lot of books, and kind of gave him the bug to write. And he never really did, but that in turn gave me the bug. And then I had another friend who as I'm writing this, I kind of put it aside for a while, pick it up again, put it aside for a while. Then I have another friend who was a copper who wrote a book, and he got it published, and I see it on Amazon. So I called him up. I said, Bob, how did you do this? Who's your publisher? He goes, well, I am. Amazon will publish your book. You just write it, and you can go through Amazon and publish it yourself. I said, I don't need an agent. I don't need a publishing house. No,
right.
No, you don't need it. Just go ahead, publish your own book. So I wrote a book. I had it edited, got a cover, wound up writing 3 more after that one. And recently, I was approached by a publishing company, Vinci Publishing, from London, England.
Wow.
And I just signed a contract with them. So
nice.
They've taken over my books, and they're going to be promoting them now, and they want more. So that's great. Yeah.
Doesn't get any better than that.
They're novels. Some of the passages in there I've taken from real life, things I've seen and done. But mostly it's novels. It's all my own imagination.
No, that's great.
They're crime thrillers. You can get them on Amazon.
The Pain Game, is that the name of the series?
That's the name of the first book. The series is Sam Laska Crime Thrillers. Sam Laska is the protagonist, the hero's name. A former Chicago cop, now doing a little investigating on the side.
Yeah.
It's Sam Laska Crime Thriller series, and you can find that easily on Amazon by either Googling The Pain Game or Googling my name.
Excellent. And we'll put the link in the show notes so you guys can pick it up easily. You can go right there and get the book. Obviously, your career has, although they're novels, your career has like greatly facilitated. Like, you can write a very accurate and exciting novel now from the life you lived. That's great.
But accuracy always doesn't sell. It can be pretty mundane. You have to give it a little bit of. You have to suspend the reader's disbelief at times.
Absolutely. Rick, it was an absolute honor to have you on, man. Great stories. Excited to hear about your career as an author. The link will be in the show notes, like I said. Just thank you, sir.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do the outro to the show. Can you hang on for just like 2 minutes?
No problem.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Rick Rybicki. Man, great stories. Great to have a Chicago guy on. The Windy City, one of the biggest cities in our country. Just really cool. Check out his books. Link is in the show notes, like I said. This is the time in the show where we thank the Patreon sergeants and above. Who I'm talking about is Captain Jamin Jack, Security 101. Check him out. Great dude. Thomas Connell. That's Lieutenant Thomas Connell to you. Thank you very much. Adam McMahon, Adam Mihal, Andy Biggs, a great and powerful Andy Biggs, Ben Peters, Bentley Barnett, Brad Thompson, Dan Carlson from Burley Boards. Check him out on Instagram. The great Chris June, Clark Luckhoff, everybody. The great Dave Ellman. Dennis Carrasquillo, everybody. Detective Nick Adams, ladies and gentlemen. Doug and Kelly Newman. Love you guys here at church. Dylan Mosher, everybody. The great Elliot Sykes. Gary Steiner. None other than the great Gary Steiner. George Cariotis. Thank you, sir. Greg Gadboy. J.A. Family. Thank you. The great Jake Pinedo. James Rhodes, the great James Rhodes, everybody. Jason Labrie, ladies and gentlemen. The great Jason Lau. Jessica King, everybody. John Jordan, thank you, sir. John Shoemaker, Justin King, the great Kyle Roberts, Kyle Napier, everybody. Lauren Stimson, ladies and gentlemen. The handsome Lane Campbell. Michael Roach from Roach Machine AI Solutions, check him out. Iceman Motocrop Chronicles, check his podcast out. Great man. Got his cup with me all the time. Nancy Hammond, everybody. The great Paul Maloney. Raymond Arsenal, ladies and gentlemen. The great Raymond Arsenal. Big Ray, everybody. Richard Tolles, keep on trucking, brother. Saucer McNabb. Scott Young, everybody. Sean Clifford. Seth Wright. The great Sheriff Ronald Long. Tammy Walsh, keeping it down at dispatch. Tony Fahey, William James Long. That's Deputy William James Long. You, thank you very much. Zach Haney, Zachary Pleat, and the great George Tessier. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I truly appreciate your devotion to the show, getting these stories out there so people can hear what these men and women of law enforcement actually do. I'm so appreciative, and I will see you guys next week.